The earth remembers cold. Beneath the soil of continents, beneath the sediments of oceans, beneath the scars of stone, lie the traces of a world locked in ice. For millions of years, our planet has moved in cycles, warmth and green, then frost and silence. Glaciers grew like armies, spreading across the land. Seas shrank, forests withered, life retreated into fragile refuges, clinging to warmth where it could. These were the ice ages, long winters written into Earth's memory, vast spans of time when survival was the only story. But now we live in a pause. For 10,000 years, the ice has been in retreat. Glaciers that once carved valleys have melted back into the mountain forests stretch across what was once frozen plain. Humanity was born into this window of warmth, and within it, civilization has flourished. Cities, agriculture, history, all of it belongs to this brief interlude, this fragile springtime in the cycle of Earth. And yet, the cycle is not broken. The rhythms of orbit and tilt, of oceans and atmosphere, still beat beneath us. The great patterns that summoned the ice before may one day summon it again. A future where glaciers return, where winters stretch for millennia, where humanity faces not fire, but cold. This is the story of ice, past, present, and possible. A story of how Earth freezes and thaws, how life endures in cycles larger than empires, larger than civilizations. And it is also the story of us, of what it would mean to face such a future. Beyond the ice age lies a question. Are we safe in warmth, or standing at the edge of another freeze? The story of ice moved from myth into science only slowly. For centuries, naturalists puzzled over the evidence, but lacked the framework to see the whole. In Switzerland, villagers told tales of stone rivers left behind when glaciers retreated. In Scotland, farmers wondered at boulders that bore no resemblance to nearby bedrock. In Scandinavia, legends spoke of trolls who hurled massive stones across the land. Each culture invented an explanation, because the human mind cannot abide mystery. But the truth was greater than stories. These were the fingerprints of a force so vast it had reshaped the face of continents. Louis Agassiz gave that force a name. In 1837, he stood before the Swiss Society of Natural Sciences and declared that Europe had once been covered by an ocean of ice. To his peers, the idea seemed absurd. Glaciers were confined to mountains, fragile rivers of frozen water that advanced and retreated within narrow valleys. How could they ever cover entire countries? Yet Agassiz insisted the evidence was everywhere. Rocks polished smooth, valleys shaped like bowls, ridges of debris left behind like tidal lines. He saw the landscape not as static, but as a record. And once his colleagues began to look with the same eyes, they saw it too. By the mid-19th century, the Great Ice Age had moved from speculation to accepted fact. Geologists traced moraines across Europe, North America, and Asia. They mapped valleys U-shaped by glaciers instead of rivers. They studied striations, grooves etched into stone by rocks dragged beneath the ice. The evidence converged into a single picture. Vast sheets of ice had once stretched thousands of miles, carving, grinding, shaping. This revelation changed more than geology. It changed our sense of time. Before, the Earth's story had been told in centuries, or at most millennia. Now, the patience of ice revealed epochs. To carve mountains, to flatten plains, to hollow out lakes required not hundreds, but hundreds of thousands of years. Humanity's history, by comparison, was a breath. The ice taught us humility, the kind only deep time can give. As the 20th century dawned, new tools uncovered even deeper layers of memory. Oceanographers drilled into the seabed and found layers of sediment, each preserving a climate record, shells of tiny organisms, their isotopes encoding the temperature of ancient seas. Glaciologists bored into the great ice sheets of Greenland and Antarctica, pulling up cylinders of frozen time. Within those cores lay bubbles of ancient air, each a capsule of Earth's atmosphere from thousands of years ago. These records confirmed what the rocks had hinted. The planet moves in cycles, glacials and interglacials, ice advancing and retreating, repeating not once, but dozens of times over the last 2.5 million years. What had seemed like a one-time catastrophe was in fact a rhythm. Earth breathes in frost and exhales in warmth, over spans of time beyond imagination. The ghosts beneath our feet were not accidents. They were chapters in a recurring story. The moraines in New England, the drumlins of Ireland, the eskers of Canada. All were lines in the same epic, and the epic was unfinished. For if ice had come before, it could come again. This realization unsettled scientists and philosophers alike. Civilization had flourished only in the current warm interlude, the Holocene, a period of unusual stability. What, then, did it mean that the Earth's natural rhythm pointed toward future cold? Were we living in a borrowed springtime? Would the ice return to erase what we have built? The questions remain even now, shadows beneath the data, reminders that the planet's patience is longer than ours. And so, the ghosts beneath our feet became not only evidence, but prophecy. They are not simply scars of what was. They are warnings of what may be. Every boulder dropped by a melting glacier whispers, "I will come again." Every valley carved by ancient ice murmurs, "This too is temporary." Every fjord, every lake, every striation says, "The story is not finished." To walk the earth is to walk upon memory. To build upon it is to borrow time. The ghosts remind us that permanence is an illusion, that civilization is fragile, that we are tenants on a planet whose rhythms we cannot control. They remind us that beneath the soil of cities, beneath the highways and the towers, lies a record of a world locked in frost. And that frost is not gone. It is only waiting. The first chapter of the Ice Age story ends with this unsettling truth. The ghosts beneath our feet are not silent. They are speaking, if we have the patience to listen. They tell us that we are not the first to inhabit this world, and we will not be the last. They tell us that the ice has ruled before and will rule again. And they ask us the question at the heart of this journey. When the earth remembers cold once more, will we be ready? The earth is not still. Though it seems solid beneath our feet, it drifts, tilts, wobbles, and sways. We live upon a planet that dances to rhythms we cannot feel, cycles so vast that only the patience of stone can measure them. These rhythms are not measured in days or years, but in tens of thousands of years. Deep time, time that stretches beyond memory. And in these rhythms lies the secret of the ice. For the glaciers that have come and gone are not accidents. They are summoned by the slow mechanics of orbit and tilt, by the way Earth moves through space. The Serbian mathematician Milutin Milankovic gave them form and equations a century ago, showing how the geometry of Earth's path around the Sun governs its climate. His work revealed the great metronome of the planet, ticking in cycles of eccentricity, tilt, and precession. Together, these cycles decide how much sunlight falls upon Earth, and where and when. Together, they summon the ice. The first cycle is eccentricity. the shape of Earth's orbit around the Sun. It is not a perfect circle, but an ellipse that slowly stretches and relaxes every 100,000 years. When the orbit is more elliptical, the difference between Earth's closest and farthest points from the Sun becomes greater. Summers grow warmer, winters colder. When the orbit is more circular, the difference shrinks, and seasons even out. The second cycle is obliquity, the tilt of Earth's axis. Today, our planet leans at about 23.5 degrees, giving us the seasons. But that tilt wobbles between 22 and 24.5 degrees over a cycle of 41,000 years. A greater tilt means stronger seasons, hotter summers, colder winters. A lesser tilt means milder seasons, more uniform climates. And it is this tilt, this slow breathing of the axis, that determines how far the ice can reach. The third cycle is precession, the wobble of Earth's axis, like a spinning top. Over 26,000 years, the axis traces a circle, pointing to different stars. This changes the timing of the seasons relative to Earth's orbit, shifting when summer and winter occur. Sometimes the northern hemisphere leans toward the sun during perihelion, making summers intense. Sometimes it leans away, making them weak. This subtle shift decides whether ice survives each summer or melts away. Alone, each cycle is small. Together, they are powerful. They modulate the distribution of sunlight across the planet, altering the balance between melting and freezing. When the cycles align, when eccentricity, tilt, and precession all favor cooler summers in the north, ice grows. Snow that falls in winter does not fully melt in summer. Layer by layer, year by year, glaciers build. When the cycles shift, summers strengthen, ice retreats, and warmth returns. These rhythms are written into the cores of ice and the sediments of the sea. The patterns of oxygen isotopes rise and fall like breath, marking glacial and interglacial ages across millions of years. Cold, then warm, then cold again. A heartbeat measured not in centuries, but in epochs. The evidence is overwhelming. The planet moves to these rhythms, and so do we. Consider what this means. Civilization has arisen only in the last 10,000 years, during the current warm interglacial. Agriculture, writing, cities, industry, all of it depends on stable climate. Yet this stability is only a pause in the rhythm. The last 2.5 million years, the Quaternary, have been dominated by ice. Warmth is the exception. Cold is the rule. By the language of the cycles, our spring is temporary. The metronome of the planet ticks on, indifferent to us, already shifting toward future winters. This realization is humbling, for we often imagine ourselves as masters of Earth, bending it to our will. Yet beneath our feet is a planet that breathes in rhythms far beyond our power. We may alter its air with carbon, its oceans with heat, its forests with fire, but the great cycles continue. Tilt and orbit do not heat our cities. Precession does not pause for our empires. The rhythm is larger than us. And yet, we are not outside it. We are born of it. The migrations of our ancestors, the refuges of species, the shaping of valleys and plains, all flowed from these cycles. The very conditions that allowed our rise were written by them. We are children of eccentricity, of tilt, of precession. The ice ages carved us as surely as they carved the land. Philosophers might call this the Earth's clock, a reminder that time is more than human. Each cycle is a hand upon the dial, moving slowly, inexorably, measuring not our years, but the planet's. To live within such time is to feel small, but it is also to feel awe. For in these rhythms lies the grandeur of a living world, a world that moves not randomly, but with patterns, a world that remembers. And so, the long rhythm of the planet continues. The cycles align and misalign. The ice grows and melts. The earth breathes in frost and exhales in warmth. We live in one breath, one interlude, one fragile pause. But beneath us, the rhythm ticks on, whispering of winters yet to come. Ice does not simply reshape land, it reshapes life. When glaciers spread across continents, they do more than carve valleys and grind stone. They dictate where forests grow, where rivers flow, where animals migrate, and where humans survive. Every species is forced to bend to the rhythm of cold or vanish into silence. In the age of ice, forests retreated. Across Europe and North America, woodlands shrank, giving way to tundra and steppe. Where once oaks and pines had stretched, now grasslands rolled, windswept and treeless, dotted with hardy shrubs and lichen. The air was colder, the winters longer, the summers too short to sustain the richness of green. For animals, it was both prison and opportunity. The great mammals of the Pleistocene found their stage here. Mammoths marched across the steppes, woolly coats shielding them from cutting winds. Woolly rhinoceroses grazed in herds, their horns sweeping snow aside in search of grass. Saber-toothed cats stalked prey beneath skies gray with frost. Bison, horses, giants, but that tilt wobbles between 22 and 24.5 degrees over a cycle of 41,000 years. A greater tilt means stronger seasons, hotter summers, colder winters. A lesser tilt means milder seasons, more uniform climates. And it is this tilt, this slow breathing of the axis, that determines how far the ice can reach. The third cycle is precession, the wobble of Earth's axis, like a spinning top. Over 26,000 years, the axis traces a circle, pointing to different stars. This changes the timing of the seasons relative to Earth's orbit, shifting when summer and winter occur. Sometimes the northern hemisphere leans toward the sun during perihelion, making summers intense. Sometimes it leans away, making them weak. This subtle shift decides whether ice survives each summer or melts away. Alone, each cycle is small. Together, they are powerful. They modulate the distribution of sunlight across the planet, altering the balance between melting and freezing. When the cycles align, when eccentricity, tilt, and precession all favor cooler summers in the north, ice grows. Snow that falls in winter does not fully melt in summer. Layer by layer, year by year, glaciers build. When the cycles shift, summers strengthen, ice retreats, and warmth returns. These rhythms are written into the cores of ice and the sediments of the sea. The patterns of oxygen isotopes rise and fall like breath, marking glacial and interglacial ages across millions of years. Cold, then warm, then cold again. A heartbeat measured not in centuries, but in epochs. The evidence is overwhelming. The planet moves to these rhythms, and so do we. Consider what this means. Civilization has arisen only in the last 10,000 years, during the current warm interglacial. Agriculture, writing, cities, industry, all of it depends on stable climate. Yet this stability is only a pause in the rhythm. The last 2.5 million years, the Quaternary, have been dominated by ice. Warmth is the exception. Cold is the rule. By the language of the cycles, our spring is temporary. The metronome of the planet ticks on, indifferent to us, already shifting toward future winters. This realization is humbling, for we often imagine ourselves as masters of Earth, bending it to our will. Yet beneath our feet is a planet that breathes in rhythms far beyond our power. We may alter its air with carbon, its oceans with heat, its forests with fire, but the great cycles continue. Tilt and orbit do not heat our cities. Precession does not pause for our empires. The rhythm is larger than us, and yet we are not outside it. We are born of it. The migrations of our ancestors, the refuges of species, the shaping of valleys and plains, all flowed from these cycles. The very conditions that allowed our rise were written by them. We are children of eccentricity, of tilt, of precession. The ice ages carved us as surely as they carved the land. Philosophers might call this the Earth's clock, a reminder that time is more than human. Each cycle is a hand upon the dial, moving slowly, inexorably, measuring not our years, but the planet's. To live within such time is to feel small, but it is also to feel awe, for in these rhythms lies the grandeur of a living world, a world that moves not randomly, but with patterns, a world that remembers. And so, the long rhythm of the planet continues. The cycles align and misalign. The ice grows and melts. The earth breathes in frost and exhales in warmth. We live in one breath, one interlude, one fragile pause. But beneath us, the rhythm ticks on, whispering of winters yet to come. Ice does not simply reshape land. It reshapes life. When glaciers spread across continents, they do more than carve valleys and grind stone. They dictate where forests grow, where rivers flow, where animals migrate, and where humans survive. Every species is forced to bend to the rhythm of cold or vanish into silence. In the age of ice, forests retreated. Across Europe and North America, woodlands shrank, giving way to tundra and steppe. Where once oaks and pines had stretched, now grasslands rolled, windswept and treeless, dotted with hardy shrubs and lichen. The air was colder, the winters longer, the summers too short to sustain the richness of green. For animals, it was both prison and opportunity. The great mammals of the Pleistocene found their stage here. Mammoths marched across the steppes, woolly coats shielding them from cutting wind. Woolly rhinoceroses grazed in herds, their horns sweeping snow aside in search of grass. Saber-toothed cats stalked prey beneath skies gray with frost. Bison, horses, giant deer, all thrived in the cold, finding abundance in the wide plains left bare by retreating forests. It was an age of giants, an ecosystem sculpted by ice, demanding strength and endurance. For humans, the ice was both threat and teacher. Our ancestors migrated in response to its advance and retreat, following herds, seeking warmth, surviving in pockets where the cold could not reach. Fire became more than tool. It became lifeline. Caves became sanctuaries, walls painted with animals whose breath still steamed in the cold outside. Tools grew sharper, clothing thicker, shelters more ingenious. The ice tested humanity, and in testing, it shaped us. Yet the ice was not only destroyer, it was also preserver. In its cold grip, life could be sealed away for millennia. Mammoths, entombed in permafrost, their hair and flesh still intact. Seeds buried in frozen ground, dormant yet alive. Even humans, fallen into glaciers, preserved with astonishing fidelity. The ice erases, but it also remembers. In its silence, it holds fragments of what was, as if unwilling to let the past fully die. This paradox, ice as both destroyer and preserver, gives it a strange poetry. It is ruthless in its advance, erasing forests, drowning rivers, scouring soil. Yet in its depths, it keeps what it takes, returning it to the future as if offering a reminder. Every thaw reveals bones, tools, seeds, whispers of lives long vanished. The ice is harsh, but it is also archive. For early humans, life at the edge of ice was a story of movement. When glaciers advanced, populations retreated to refuges, valleys, coasts, plains where warmth lingered. When the ice withdrew, they followed the returning forests, recolonizing the land, carrying their cultures into new spaces. Entire myths and traditions may have been shaped by this rhythm. The fear of advancing cold, the joy of returning green. To be human, then, was to be wanderer, always caught between frost and thaw. And in this rhythm, something remarkable emerged. Article. Deep in caves, lit by firelight, our ancestors painted animals with strokes of ochre and charcoal. Horses galloped across stone. Mammoths marched across walls. Hands pressed onto rock, as if to say, "We were here." In the heart of cold, beauty blossomed. Perhaps because survival was hard, the impulse to create was stronger. Perhaps because the world outside was harsh, the world inside needed color and story. The ice tested bodies, but it also awakened minds. We carry this inheritance still. Our myths of struggle, our stories of exile and return, our reverence for fire, our awe of the cold, all are echoes of those lives lived at the edge of glaciers. To know ourselves is to know that we are shaped by frost as much as by warmth. Life adapts, always. Plants clung to valleys where warmth lingered. Animals grew coats thicker, bodies larger, instincts sharper. Humans grew imagination, the ability to see beyond cold nights into possible futures. The ice sculpted landscapes, but it also sculpted minds. And in doing so, it prepared us for the fragility of the present. The lesson of life at the edge of ice is simple but profound. Survival is not about mastery, but about adaptation. The mammoth, mighty as it was, fell. The woolly rhinoceros vanished. The saber-toothed cat left only bones. But humans endured, not by strength, but by invention, by fire, by imagination. The ice was merciless, but it could not silence the will to endure. And so, when we look at the glaciers of today, shrinking back into mountains, we should remember that they are not only relics, they tell us that the world we inhabit, warm and green, is temporary. That life has stood at the edge of ice before, and may again. That we, descendants of wanderers, are heirs to a world where survival was never certain. The ice will return someday. When it does, the question will not be whether the planet survives. It always has. The question will be whether we remember the lessons of those who lived at its edge, that to endure is to adapt, to imagine, to create. That even in the coldest darkness, life finds ways to move forward. 20,000 years ago, the world was gripped by silence. It was the peak of the last glacial age, the moment when the ice reached furthest, when the cold was deepest. Vast sheets of frozen water spread across continents. Mountains vanished beneath white, and seas shrank as water was locked into ice. The earth wore a mask of winter, and life survived only in the cracks of its surface. This was the last glacial maximum, the coldest chapter of the Quaternary, the last great winter to sweep across the planet. Imagine North America then. From the Arctic Circle to the Ohio River, from the Atlantic to the Great Plains, the Laurentide ice sheet stretched in silence, a wall of ice up to 2 miles thick. Mountains like the Adirondacks and Appalachians stood dwarfed beside it, valleys buried, rivers redirected. Where today are cities and farmland, then was only whiting southward, until it met warmer air. The Alps were swallowed, their peaks protruding like teeth through a jaw of ice. Across Siberia, permafrost extended deep. turning forests into tundra, rivers into frozen veins. Africa's deserts expanded as rainfall waned, while South America saw glaciers crawl from the Andes, reshaping valleys that even now bear their scars. Sea levels fell more than 100 meters. Coastlines stretched outward. The Bering Strait vanished, replaced by a bridge of land that joined Asia and North America. Across this bridge, humans and animals migrated, unknowingly writing the destiny of continents. Australia, too, extended further, its islands fused, seas pulled back to reveal what lies hidden now beneath waves. The world was smaller in water, larger in land, yet harsher in every way. For humanity, survival was a test. In Europe, small bands of hunter-gatherers clung to refugees in Spain, Italy, and the Balkans, where forests still grew and animals grazed. In Siberia, groups adapted to permafrost, hunting mammoth and reindeer, building shelters of bone and hide. In Africa, where warmth persisted, populations endured but faced drought and scarcity. The Americas, newly entered, became landscapes of opportunity and danger, where megafauna roamed unchallenged until humans spread further. Fire was constant companion, not only for warmth, but for survival itself. In caves, its light-illuminated walls where visions were painted. Bison, aurochs, horses, mammoths, animals both hunted and revered. These images were not mere decoration. They were lifelines of imagination, ways of making sense of a world ruled by cold. In the deepest winters, humans created beauty, perhaps because beauty was defiance. The last glacial maximum was also an age of giants. Mammoths trudged across icy plains, their herds reshaping the steppe with their grazing. Saber-toothed cats and cave lions prowled, predators of mythic power. Giant sloths and glyptodons roamed South America, their massive bodies adapted to scarcity. And yet, beneath the weight of cold, the Americas, newly entered, became landscapes of opportunity and danger, where megafauna roamed unchallenged until humans spread further. Fire was constant companion, not only for warmth, but for survival itself. In caves, its light-illuminated walls where visions were painted. Bison, aurochs, horses, mammoths, animals both hunted and revered. These images were not mere decorations. They were lifelines of imagination, ways of making sense of a world ruled by cold. In the deepest winters, humans created beauty, perhaps because beauty was defiance. The last glacial maximum was also an age of giants. Mammoths trudged across icy plains, their herds reshaping the steppe with their grazing. Saber-toothed cats and cave lions prowled, predators of mythic power. Giant sloths and glyptodons roamed South America, their massive bodies adapted to scarcity. And yet, beneath the weight of cold, many of these titans stood at the edge of extinction. The balance of ecosystems was fragile, poised between endurance and collapse. But even in this frozen world, change brewed. The Earth's orbit shifted, its tilt realigned, its precession altered the rhythm of sunlight. Slowly, summers in the north grew stronger. Slowly, glaciers began to falter. At first imperceptible, then undeniable, the ice retreated. Rivers returned to valleys, forests crept back across plains, seas rose to reclaim the land. The long winter was ending, though its retreat took thousands of years. When the thaw came, humanity moved with it. Populations spread northward, following rivers and animals into lands abandoned by ice. New technologies arose, microliths, bows, more refined shelters. Agriculture, though still far off, lay seated in the possibilities of stability. The ice had tested humanity to its limit, and humanity had endured. In the ashes of that endurance, civilization's first sparks began to glow. But the lesson of the last glacial maximum lingers still, for it shows us how thin the margin of survival can be. A few degrees colder, a few centuries longer, and the story of humanity might have ended in silence. Civilization was not inevitable. It was born of chance, of timing, of survival through the harshest winter Earth has known. And so, to remember the last glacial maximum is to remember humility. To stand upon a landscape carved by glaciers and know that our ancestors walked at the edge of extinction. To see the valleys they left us and know that they endured not by strength, but by adaptation, by imagination, by fire and story. To remember that civilization is not older than the ice, it is younger than its retreat. The last great winter was not the end of the story. It was the threshold. From its retreat came warmth, and from warmth came us. But the ice is not gone. The ice returned. The last great winter retreated, and with it, the world changed. For 10,000 years, ice sheets shrank, forests spread, seas rose, and the earth warmed into a new state, neither as hot as ancient ages of fire, nor as cold as the long glacial dark. It was something rare, balance. This balance is what we call the Holocene, the epoch in which all of human civilization has been written. It is, in the measure of geological time, only a heartbeat. Yet within it, humanity has transformed from scattered bands of survivors to the architects of cities, cultures, and empires. We live in that balance still, though we rarely notice it. The Holocene is a pause in the long rhythm of the planet, an interlude between winters, a fragile spring. Its stability is deceptive. Compared to the millennia of ice before, these 10,000 years are unusual, a rare plateau of climate that has allowed grain to grow in abundance, rivers to run predictably, and civilizations to take root. Without it, history as we know it could not exist. Imagine the moment of transition. In Mesopotamia, floodplains grew fertile as rivers stabilized. In the Indus Valley, monsoon rains became more reliable. In the valleys of China, it's left behind soils rich with nutrients, valleys freshly carved, plains ready for seed. Where glaciers had crushed, they now offered. Humanity stepped into these opportunities, and for the first time, food came not only from hunting and gathering, but from planting. Agriculture was not inevitable. It was a gift of this fragile spring. With food came settlement. Villages grew into towns, towns into cities. Walls rose, temples were built, writing carved into clay. Trade followed rivers. The last 2.5 million years have been defined by cycles of ice. Warmth like this is rare, brief, and unstable. We exist in a window, and we have built everything we know upon it. The ghosts of glaciers remind us that the window is temporary. The rhythms of orbit whisper that warmth is borrowed, not permanent. And even within this warmth, fragility has shown itself. A few degrees of cooling, and societies trembled. During the Younger Dryas, 12,000 years ago, a sudden return to near glacial cold halted the spread of farming in parts of the world. Centuries later, the Little Ice Age brought crop failures, famine, and unrest across Europe. Civilization thrives in stability, but stability is rare. The Holocene has given us just enough, just long enough, for cities to rise. But its gift has never been secure. Philosophically, this should humble us. We imagine civilization as inevitable, progress as linear, history as destiny. But none of it would exist without this interlude. The Holocene is the silent partner in every triumph and tragedy, the unseen foundation beneath every empire. Its balance has given us time, and we have filled that time with monuments, wars, discoveries, dreams. Yet all of it rests upon climate no more stable than glass. The ice is not gone. It lingers in Greenland, in Antarctica, in glaciers perched upon mountains. It is patient. It retreats, but it remembers. The Holocene is only a pause in its story, a breath between winters. The question is not whether the ice can return, but when. And so we live in contradiction. Civilization depends upon stability, but Earth's rhythms are not stable. The Holocene feels eternal, but in truth, it is brief. We have built cities of stone and towers of steel upon a stage that may not last. This is why scientists call our age fragile, because in the measure of deep time, all of history is a flicker, and beneath it, the planet continues its rhythm. Perhaps that is why the Holocene feels sacred. It is not only the backdrop of our story, it is the condition of our existence. Without it, there is no agriculture, no cities, no history. With it, there is everything we call human. It is the quiet springtime between winters, the fragile pause in which we became who we are. But to know it is fragile is also to know it can end. And as we face a future of fire and carbon, the question grows sharper. Will we warm the planet beyond recognition? Or will the ice return, indifferent to us? Either way, the Holocene is not forever. It is a page in the Earth's book, and the page will turn. For most of Earth's history, the rhythms of climate belong to the heavens. Tilt, orbit, and precession dictated the waxing and waning of glaciers, the breathing of frost and warmth across the ages. The ice came, the ice retreated, and life bent to its cycle. But in our time, a new force has entered the balance. Not orbital mechanics, not solar variations, but humanity itself. We are altering the rhythm, bending the climate with fire. In the last 2 centuries, our species has burned the past. Coal, oil, gas, the stored sunlight of ancient forests and seas, released in a single geological instant. With every furnace, every engine, every factory, carbon once locked in stone and soil has returned to the air. In doing so, we have changed the atmosphere more rapidly than any natural cycle in millions of years. The consequences are already visible. Glaciers retreat, not because orbital cycles demand it, but because our fires warm the air. Seas rise not because the planet breathes into warmth naturally, but because we have tipped its balance. Storms grow fiercer, droughts longer, ecosystems tremble. The Earth, which once moved to rhythms of patience, now stumbles to the temp. And here lies the paradox. The very forces that threaten to overheat our planet may also delay, or even prevent, the return of the ice. According to the natural cycles, another glaciation should loom in the far future, tens of thousands of years away, but inevitable. Yet with greenhouse gases saturating the air, the cold may never come. We may have broken the metronome, silenced the rhythm, frozen ourselves in an artificial spring. Some scientists suggest that without human intervention, another ice age might have begun within 50,000 years. With our emissions, the clock may be pushed back hundreds of thousands. We have not only extended the Holocene, but created something new. An Anthropocene, an epoch in which human fire outweighs celestial mechanics. The Earth now bends to us, whether we will it or not. Philosophically, this is both triumph and tragedy. Triumph, because we may have spared ourselves the slow suffocation of advancing ice, the collapse of civilizations beneath glaciers. Tragedy, because the price of that triumph is chaos of another kind, seas swallowing coasts, deserts expanding, species vanishing faster than glaciers once melted. We have traded frost for fire, and the fire is burning us. The irony is sharp. For generations, we feared the return of the ice, imagining frozen cities, endless winters, civilizations buried beneath sheets of white. Now we fear the opposite: heat waves, floods, storms, oceans swallowing the land. In mastering one fate only to summon another, we have become yet perhaps this has always been humanity's place, between fire and ice. Fire kept our ancestors alive at the edge of glaciers, driving back the cold. Now fire threatens to consume the world, driving back the ice too far. We are both saviors and destroyers, our ingenuity both blessing and curse. The Holocene was fragile. Our fire has made it more so. And still, the question lingers. What kind of world do we wish to inhabit? A frozen one, where survival means endurance against ice, or a scorched one, where survival means resilience against heat? Neither is merciful. Both test the limits of adaptation. Perhaps the truest answer is balance, but balance is what we have undone. Fire versus ice is not only a scientific paradox, it is a metaphor for humanity itself. We are creatures of contradiction, capable of preserving and destroying, of delaying winters while accelerating storms. The ice may not return soon, but the cost of its absence is already reshaping the world. Cities flood, forests burn, species vanish. A different kind of extinction, but extinction nonetheless. And so we must ask, is it better to face the rhythm of nature or the chaos of ourselves? Better to endure the ice or the fire? Perhaps neither. Perhaps the only answer is to learn at last the lesson of the glaciers, that survival does not come from mastery, but from humility. The earth is vast, its cycles patient, its balance delicate. To imagine we can control it is folly. To imagine we can ignore it is fatal. In the end, the paradox remains. Our fire has stayed the ice, but at a cost we are only beginning to measure. The glaciers may not advance, but the seas will. The ice may not bury us, but the heat may burn us. Between fire and ice, humanity stands at a threshold, uncertain, fragile, unprepared. The story of the future is not yet written, but the choice is clear: fire or ice, or balance if we can find it. The rhythm of the earth is patient. Human fire may delay it, even silence it for a time. But deep beneath the surface, the cycles endure. Tilt and orbit still shift. Precession still turns the axis. The heartbeat of the planet still beats in slow, invisible pulse. One day, whether in 50,000 years or 500,000, the balance may tip again. The fire may fade, the air may clear, and the ice will remember its path. When the ice returns, it will not come as sudden catastrophe. It will come as a whisper. Summers will grow weaker, their heat no longer enough to melt all the winter snow. Year after year, white will linger longer upon the mountains. Glaciers, now retreating, will halt. Then they will advance. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, valleys will fill again with frozen rivers. Centuries will pass before the change becomes undeniable. But by then, the planet will be committed. The glaciers will march. Imagine the world in such a time. The great cities of the north, London, Berlin, Moscow, New York, Toronto, all swallowed not by sea, but by frost. Ice sheets, kilometers thick, will spread from Greenland and Scandinavia, from Canada and Siberia, pressing southward mile by mile. The Great Lakes will vanish beneath frozen weight. Rivers will be buried. Mountains will disappear beneath domes of white. Civilization, if it endures, will retreat. Populations will migrate toward the equator, seeking lands still fertile, seas still liquid, climates still kind. Africa, South America, Southern Asia, Australia. These will become the refugees of humanity, as they were for our ancestors in winters past. Nations will collapse, borders will shift, cultures will collide in vast migrations. Humanity will become nomadic again, not by choice, but by necessity, driven not by curiosity, but by survival. And yet, in this future, we will not be as our ancestors were. We will carry knowledge, technology, memory. Underground cities may bloom, carved beneath rock, warmed by geothermal heat. Oceans, though shrunk, will still provide. Crops may be grown under glass, in towers lit by artificial suns. Space, too, may offer refuge, colonies orbiting above a frozen Earth, waiting for the thaw. The difference will not be whether humanity can endure, but how. The return of the ice would test not only our ingenuity, but our humility. For even with technology, even with fire and machines, we cannot halt the slow advance of glaciers once the cycles align. We could only adapt, reshaping civilization to fit the narrowed margins of survival. And in doing so, we would relearn the lessons of the past. That permanence is an illusion, that survival is a story of movement, that endurance is written not in conquest, but in adaptation. The image of frozen cities is haunting. Skyscrapers rising like black teeth from white plains, monuments buried, highways erased. Our greatest works, our proudest achievements, reduced to ruins beneath ice. And yet, there is beauty in the thought, for ice preserves. Within its depths, fragments of our world may be held, waiting for the thaw to tell the story of who we were. The ice that buries is also the ice that remembers. When the ice returns, humanity will change. Cultures will merge, languages will shift, myths will be rewritten. Just as our ancestors carved animals upon cave walls, so might future generations paint visions of their frozen world, recording their struggle, their endurance, their hope. The ice will not silence imagination. It will shape it. It always has. And yet, the deeper question is this: what will we become in such a time? Will we fracture, competing for shrinking lands? Or will we unite, recognizing that survival depends not on division, but on cooperation? The ice does not negotiate. It does not bend. It advances. The only choice left to us would be whether to face it together or alone. Science tells us that the next great glaciation is distant, that even without our fire, the ice will not return for tens of thousands of years. But deep time moves quickly, and civilizations are short. Rome lasted 1,000 years. Dynasties rise and fall in centuries. Even our modern world, with its technology and power, is only a few hundred years old. Compared to the patience of ice, we are a flicker. The glaciers will wait. The return of the ice is not a question of if, but of when. It may come in an age when humanity has spread to the stars, when Earth is only one home among many, or it may come sooner, when we are still bound to this planet, forced to endure as our ancestors did. Either way, its return will remind us of the same truth, that the Earth is larger than us, its rhythms deeper, its patience endless. And so, when the ice returns, we will stand again at the edge of frost, tested as those before us were. Whether in caves or towers, whether with firelight or satellites, we will endure. For life has always endured. And in enduring, we will be reminded once more of the fragility of warmth, the impermanence of civilization, and the vast, slow power of a planet that breathes in winters and springs. If the ice comes again, humanity will not face it as helpless wanderers, capable of bending rivers, splitting atoms, reaching for the stars. And yet, the return of the ice would strip away illusions of mastery, reminding us that we are still bound to Earth's rhythms. The question is not whether we could endure, but how. At first, survival would mean migration. Billions would move southward, away from the advancing sheets. Fertile belts near the equator would become crowded, reshaped into centers of civilization. Nations would collapse under the weight of migration, but new alliances would form. Humanity's map would redraw itself, not by politics, but by climate. The ice would choose our borders. Technology would become lifeline. Agriculture, confined to narrow belts, would be revolutionized. Crops grown in vertical farms, lit by artificial suns, irrigated with precision. Oceans, though lower, would still provide, their fisheries becoming the breadbasket of nations. Energy, drawn from geothermal heat, nuclear fusion, perhaps solar collected in orbit, would sustain cities through winters longer than memory. We would not return to caves. We would carve new sanctuaries, beneath mountains, beneath ice itself, into the earth where warmth lingers. There is poetry in imagining underground civilizations, cities lit not by the sun, but by the hum of reactors, their walls echoing with life protected from frost above. Cultures would adapt to artificial skies, their myths filled with memory of a world of green. Children would learn of forests not as reality, but as story, preserved in archives of glass and digital light. Yet even in such futures, life would persist. For if humanity has proven anything, it is that imagination thrives even in darkness. But not all adaptation would be retreat. Some would turn outward, to the stars. Colonies on Mars, on moons like Europa or Titan, might become more hospitable than Earth itself in deep freeze. Space, once frontier, would become refuge. Humanity scattering not by choice, but necessity. The ice would become the great filter, forcing us to leap beyond our planet if we wish to survive unchanged. In this way, the return of the ice might push us into the very destiny we dream of, becoming a species of many worlds. Philosophically, the futures in frost are not only about survival, they are about humility. The ice would remind us that our monuments, our nations, even our technologies are temporary. Skyscrapers would crumble beneath glaciers, archives would freeze, cities would vanish. Yet within the ice, fragments would be preserved. Like mammoths entombed in permafrost, our civilization's bones might survive. Machines, books, songs, perhaps even bodies. To future thawers, we would be ghosts, just as we find ghosts of the Pleistocene now. And still, there would be beauty. Imagine auroras rippling above frozen plains, silent skies filled with stars sharper than any city-bound eyes have seen. Imagine human voices echoing in caverns warmed by the earth. Laughter carrying against walls as stories are told of ancestors who lived in warmth. Imagine art born of ice, sculptures carved from glaciers, music written in tribute to silence, myths woven around the endless winter. Even in frost, culture would bloom. The greatest danger would not be the cold itself, but ourselves. Scarcity breeds conflict. Nations might wage wars over rivers, over belts of farmland, over underground havens. But it could also awaken unity, as the ice does not distinguish between borders. Survival might demand cooperation on a scale greater than any before. A civilization reorganized not by wealth or ideology, but by necessity. The ice could become our greatest enemy, or our greatest teacher. Futures in frost, then, are not futures of despair, but of transformation. Humanity has always been shaped by challenge. Fire at the edge of glaciers made us storytellers. The last great thaw, perhaps the next great freeze, would make us something new. A species that endures not by defying Earth's rhythms, but by learning to live within them. The ice will come someday. When it does, our survival will not be measured only in technology, but in imagination, in unity, in humility. The frost will test us as it has tested all life before. And as always, the lesson will be the same. To endure is to adapt. To live is to change. To face the ice is to remember that permanence is an illusion, and fragility the foundation of resilience. And so the final vision of the ice is not of extinction, but of transformation. Humanity, scattered and reshaped, living beneath, beyond, or above the frost. Our civilizations altered, our myths rewritten, but our spirit intact. For the ice may bury, but it does not end. It only changes the story, writing new chapters in a saga as old as the earth itself. The earth is patient. It has endured ages of fire and frost, of oceans rising and deserts blooming, of forests spreading and glaciers retreating. Its memory is written in stone and ice, in sediments and cores, in scars across the land. We are latecomers to this story, brief inhabitants of a fragile interlude, living in the narrow warmth of the Holocene. And though our history feels immense to us, to the earth it is a breath, a flicker, a pause between winters. We began as wanderers, surviving at the edge of glaciers. Fire was our shield, imagination our refuge. The ice shaped us, in body, in mind, in story. Then came the thaw, and in its gift of warmth, we built civilization. Fields of grain, rivers of trade, towers of stone, empires rising upon a climate unusually kind. We imagined permanence. We mistook this fragile spring for eternity. But beneath our feet, the ghosts of glaciers whispered otherwise. Now we live at a crossroads between fire and ice. Our fires, lit in engines and factories, have changed the planet faster than any natural cycle. We have delayed the ice, perhaps silenced it for thousands of years. Yet in doing so, we have summoned heat of another kind. Storms, floods, droughts, seas rising like liquid walls. We are caught between extremes. Frost we fear, fire we cannot control. And the question is not only what the earth will become, but what we will become within it. The ice will return someday. Whether in 50,000 years or 500,000, the cycles will align again, and glaciers will march southward. Perhaps by then, we will have left this planet, carrying fragments of Earth into the star. Perhaps we will endure here, beneath mountains and seas, adapting as we always have. Perhaps we will vanish, and the ice will cover our ruins, preserving us as it preserved mammoths, holding our memory in frozen silence until another spring uncovers it. But even if the ice does not return, the lesson remains. For the ice is more than water. It is reminder. It tells us that permanence is illusion, that stability is fragile, that survival is adaptation. It tells us that civilizations, like glaciers, advance and retreat, build and dissolve, leave behind only traces. It tells us that we are part of a planet larger than ourselves, a rhythm deeper than history. And yet, within that fragility lies meaning. There's more. To live between fire and ice is not to despair, but to recognize wonder, that in this brief interlude, we exist, we create, we love, we imagine. We are alive in a time when the planet allows it, and that is a gift beyond measure. So what lies beyond the ice age? Not certainty, but possibility. Perhaps warmth forever, reshaped by our fire. Perhaps frost again, demanded by the cycles of the earth. Perhaps both, in rhythms we cannot predict. But in every path, one truth endures. Humanity will be tested, as it always has. And in that test, we will discover again what it means to endure, to adapt, to belong to a restless planet. The glaciers will wait. The fire will burn in them, fragile, fleeting, yet luminous. For to be human is to live in impermanence, to build in the face of collapse, to imagine even in the coldest night. Beyond the ice age lies not only the fate of the earth, but the measure of ourselves. And when the story of this epoch is finished, when our warmth has ended and the frost has come, or the fire has consumed, the earth will remember. It always does. In stone, in ice, in silence. It will carry the memory of us